We have a presentation tonight by Dr. Samir Verma about VoIP, which I'm sure many of us have heard a lot about but haven't really done enough with. So I think this will be a very interesting presentation for everybody, and I hope we'll all get a chance to make use of this in the future. And after the presentation, I'll be talking about the future of PenLUG. I've got a brief presentation on that, and so please stick around and participate in the discussion about how we're going to move this group forward, because as I mentioned before, due to other time commitments, I'm just not able to keep doing all the work I've been doing for this club, and I'd like to get other people to step up and start helping out more and taking over. So we'll have a discussion of that at the end. But first, let's give a nice warm welcome to Dr. Samir Verma. Oh, and please silence your electronic devices.
Silence my electronic device. There we go. All right, thank you. So voice over IP. Before I get started, let me get a sense for where you folks are. How many of you have done a lot of stuff with voice over IP? Like actually run your own? Because we've got one. So if there are any questions, ask him. How about the others? Have you dabbled a little bit? Have you, other than Vonage and things like that? So yeah, if you're running Vonage, that doesn't count. That's just plug and play. We don't even know what happened inside that box. All right, so quick introduction. I'm Samir Verma. I'm an associate professor of information systems at San Francisco State. I teach mostly in the MBA program. I teach IT strategy and those kinds of generic touchy-feely courses with IT strategy and all of those things. So obviously, this kind of stuff I do this for fun, but it helps. So for most part, my job requirement focuses around teaching, and it's a lot of high-level theoretical stuff. We don't get a whole lot of opportunity to get into the details of how things work. In a sense, the MBA program is producing those pointy-haired bosses, right? We're in the business of producing pointy-haired bosses who can then go tell the rest of the world how to run things. Most of my research is around the concept of diffusion and adoption of innovative technologies. In a sense, there are lots of innovations that don't get mass adoption, right? So you can look at the classic case of VHS versus Betamax and things like that. Better technology does not always win, so why is that? And so most of my research is around that, theoretically, and the areas I look at are open source software and mobility. In terms of fun, I do mostly dabble with different flavors of Ubuntu, Linux. I've got it on my laptop, desktop. We have a lab full of Ubuntu machines. One of the projects we're doing is the Linux terminal server project. We have a server in the back, and the entire lab boots off of it. So a lot of things focused around Ubuntu. The other thing is, I don't know if you had a presentation on this, but the Nokia device, let me see if I got mine. The Nokia 770 they don't like to call it a PDA. They call it a PC tablet, internet tablet type thing. This thing runs on a Linux kernel, largely inspired by the Debian method of working, and it's got an interesting GUI and all that, so I do some work with that. Lately I've been looking into the One Laptop per Child project. They've got a very interesting interface to see how that works. And Myth TV, that was just for fun. No TV at home, so build my own. And NoCat is another Wi-Fi authentication protocol thing. So many different things, but like it says, fun. Work is work. This is fun.
So what does Sugar have to do with? Is that a?
No, this is not Sugar CRM. Sugar is the name of the GUI that runs on the OLPC laptop, and it has a very different GUI in terms of how you navigate, how you run applications, switch back and forth. So that's called Sugar. So for today, we've got, I'll do a quick introduction of the topic. We'll look at Asterisk, the project itself. where it fits, and then we'll go through a couple of demos of how this stuff works on different platforms. One distribution is called Asterisk Linux. It's a very lightweight, small distribution, and the other is called Trixbox, which is actually quite heavy and big. We'll look at both. I like to throw these effects in here of spinning and things moving because people always ask me, can you do those things in OpenOffice? And I go, sure you can. So there you go. You can do this in OpenOffice. So that's, I think, my last effect. That's what the slides are all playing. What we'll be looking at is, so under the area of telephony, we've got proprietary and the free and open source variety. And in the open source variety, we've got Asterisk, which gets a lot of press. And then there is a fork of Asterisk called OpenPBX. And there's a whole political history of why that fork happened. I'll let you investigate that on your own. There is another one called YET, which stands for Yet Another Telephony Engine. And then there is the GNU Bayonne project, which is also a telephony engine. So here the focus is on Asterisk, the project itself, and I'm going to look at two distributions, Asterisk Linux and Trixbox, but there are many others. If you do a quick search, you'll find lots of them. Some of the ones like this one here, Zorcom, they actually come from a commercial entity where they have an open source version and then they will actually sell boxes with the stuff pre-installed. So most of what I've experienced about voice over IP is that it is closer to the concept of networking and not so much about what we know about telephony. And by that, what I mean is what an average person would know about phones. So a telephone, you have a device, you plug it into the wall, you pick up the receiver, and you dial a number. That's phones. But in the world of voice over IP, the concept is closer to what we see in the area of networking, like email addresses, name at registrar, or instant messaging. You have an account at a particular domain. So voice over IP essentially works in that format of a name and a registrar addressing scheme. Some acronyms that you come across, I figured I'll just put them up on the list. And we'll be going through these in the next few minutes. So advantages of voice over IP. There are several. Some of these are, well, one is it's digital by design, it's network-based. It is IP-based, so all the economies that you get from IP-based networks, economies of scale and scope, are available to you. So for example, you have easy crossovers from voice over IP to email, voice over IP to instant messaging. We have some projects now where you go voice over IP to blogging. So you pick up the phone, you call, and you actually speak, and that gets blogged someplace or podcast. So it's very easy to cross over. We also have integration with other applications, like Trixbox has some built-in integration with Sugar CRM. So you would run this CRM application where you have customer relationship information, like phone numbers, and you could just click on the phone right there, and CRM, Sugar CRM hands it over to Asterisk, dial out the call, and log it. So those things are possible because, of course, we're running everything on one platform. No toll boundaries. IP goes everywhere, potentially everywhere. So wherever you have IP, you could conceivably have this. And then, of course, it's just one infrastructure you have to worry about, not multiple ones. So those are the plus points. When I started making a list of the negative points, the disadvantages, I couldn't come up with too many. It's new, so you have adoption issues. And this is also to do with perception. So in the mind of the consumer, voice over IP or a digital telephony network is new. Right? You see Vonage or you see ads about these things on TV. But really, even if you're using your regular plain old telephone service, in the back it's all digital. They moved to a digital network a long time ago. So we're not really doing that much. But there are adoption issues. You have migration, so that will cost. If you have a legacy system, you have to move over, that's going to cost you. It is innovative, it requires a big change. And so, as with any disruptive change, you have costs associated with that. One big question is, how's the telco going to overbill you? This stuff is cheap. So how do we make up charges to make it sound expensive? And I couldn't come up with anything else. So, yes?
What about reliability? The telco, if you buy a service from the telco, it works even if your power is out.
Mm-hmm.
And they have things like 911 and stuff.
True. Those are issues, and you see those issues with services like Vonage, where if your network is out, well, then your phone system is out. And I guess it's a matter of, well, a couple of things. One is it's a matter of time. It's a matter of time as these services get better. And the other is the companies that provide the infrastructure on the back have to play nice as well. So you hear all these cases where ISPs block voice over IP ports randomly. They go, oh, traffic congestion will block your ports. So if somebody blocks your voice over IP port, like a SIP port, then your service is not going to work. So hopefully eventually those things will go away. And a lot of that will be determined by essentially competition. Right. So if you want to design anything in this space, it's a good idea to start with doing an assessment from a network perspective, just like you would design a network. You would design endpoints, so you would go, well, there's a desktop, there's a laptop, there are access points, people move. We want roaming in the network, we want DHCP to follow certain IP addresses and so on. The same principles apply here. So as long as you think of it as a network-based app, where you have a name at registrar-like format, you can look at how identity works. One person can have multiple identities. You can have essentially a presence on a laptop, on a mobile device, on the phone, at the desk, back home. And I'll show a few examples in a bit. So the project itself, Asterisk, was originally started by Mark Spencer of Digium. And Digium is the company that now, their bread and butter is essentially hardware and services around Asterisk. So Asterisk is still free. It is GPL based. I think it started around 1999. I don't have an exact date on it, but that was around when they started talking about this. And you get a core PBX, a private branch exchange, and then you get other support services that are essentially add-ons, like voicemail, call forwarding, conferencing, and so on. And different distributions will handle this in many different ways. Some of them will prepackage it, others will require you to install these as you go. So I've put together 3 scenarios. A home use type scenario where you can just play with the stuff, set it up, and see how it works. The second is a small business scenario where we're looking at, maybe a small startup with a handful of people working and everybody has an extension. And then there is a small to medium enterprise where we're looking at a little more complex use of incoming and outgoing calls and so on. So in the first scenario, if you're for home use, you can start off with building a voice over IP network without involving the phone line. So don't involve the plain old telephone service. Just a server with a bunch of extensions, all IP based. The endpoints are on PCs, so you could have a soft phone running on your computer, or you could have these devices you can buy, which are essentially voice over IP phones that you can plug into your hub or switch, gets an IP address and becomes a phone. So you can start off simple, not involve calls actually getting transferred onto the actual phone line, the plain old telephone service. And so you can have extensions for friends and family. They can be in the same local area around the world. They can travel. They can take their extension with them on their laptop. Whenever they plug in, that extension is always available. So for example, if I were to set this up, and my brother had an extension of 102, I don't need to know where he is, as long as he is online. I dial 102, the network will find him, and his phone will ring on his PC, on his laptop. So that's a simple thing that anybody can start with and play with this stuff.
That assumes that he's registered, right? That assumes that he's registered on your machine.
Right. So you have to set up your essentially a list of friends and family, assign an extension to each person, and then most of these clients are automated. When your machine boots up, it runs and sits in a corner, and so their presence is made available on the server. When you dial that number, it gets to them. Now, if they're not logged in, most of these setups also have voicemail. So you dial 102, that person's not logged in, it bounces off, you give them a voicemail. Yeah.
So sorry, do I understand this then that this is sort of an isolated pool of telephones within your house?
Yes.
Nothing to do with connecting up to the larger phone
Right.
network
Mhm.
outside that, you know, the city hall is on or anything like that?
Sure.
This is all just a local thing. And then if one of those people, instead of being down the hall, is across the world,
Mhm.
they can get to this server via IP,
Exactly.
and it's as though they're down the hall.
Yes.
So I could pick up the phone and just say dial Samir, and it would find you wherever you happen to be, as long as you had IP connectivity.
Right. So because the IP network is, so that's where it's working as a PBX, a private branch exchange. It's a private network, private, extensions. Now, you're within the same IP space as far as the Asterisk server is concerned, but physically you could be anywhere. There's a handshake between the soft phone on your laptop, let's say, and the server sitting at home, and then the two are connected. So all it's really doing is rerouting your request for a phone call. So that would be a simple scenario to start with to kind of see how this works. My experience has been, I've been doing this for some time now, mostly dabbling, but my experience has been that if you start with something that has several different ways to configure, then you get lost in the config files. The config files are actually not very nice when it comes to Asterisk. They're a little bit of a pain too. So start with something simple, and then once you figure out it works, go to the next step. So the next step is, let's say you have a small business. So you already have your PBX set up. Everybody's got an extension. That extension can be a physical phone, or it can be a soft phone. And then you want people to be able to dial out to the real world, right? Or to have these phones. So you want to call me at SF State 415-338-7016. Well, for that to happen, the call has to be transferred from the PBX network to a phone line. And so there you would have one or two phone lines coming in and going out, carrying your phone calls. And from any of these extensions, when you have to dial out, you would dial something like 9 and then the number. So the Asterisk server recognizes that 9 as, well, this is going outside. So when that request comes in, it will actually transfer to the phone line, and the phone call will then go out. Now, imagine that you have a home office set up here, and you're traveling, you're in Singapore for some reason, and you want to call me. Well, if you live in this neighborhood, your area code is going to be 650. I'm in 415. You're in Singapore, but you could still go 9, 415-338-7016. The call will go from Singapore to your home office via IP, hop over to the phone line, and ring the office. You don't have to make international calls and all of those things. And as far as I'm concerned, I'll think the call came from Redwood City, right? Because it's going to say 650. So the PBX part, people on that side of the network can really be anywhere. And so you can have a couple of lines. In some cases, people have phone lines where they set it up for a rollover. So if one is busy, it rolls over to the next. Or they have lines where one line is for local calls, one is for international calls because they have a different billing system. And Asterisk will handle those depending on how you dial the phone number. So you can get that, and then you can do things like extension for tech support, sales, customer service, hit 0 to get the operator, voicemail, and all of those things. And everybody gets an extension, right? So this is a setup you can start off with 1 or 2 phone lines. You'll need some more hardware for this, but then this is something that can then grow from there. Yes, Kumar?
So how much bandwidth does each, IP phone line take in your network?
So there are a couple of things. One is bandwidth, the other is latency. And in this case, latency makes more of a hit than bandwidth. And a lot of it then also depends on the codec that is being used to transcode your voice and then send it across. So there is a whole set of codecs that you can pick within Asterisk. Some of them are proprietary, so you have to get a license for those. Others are not. So you have a subset, and then depending on the handshake on the other side, it will pick the best codec that it can find for that call. Now, of course, if the codecs are not, if they're designed for low bandwidth, so let's say there's a handshake that happens with the codec for low bandwidth, like 8 kilobits per second, obviously the call quality is not going to be that good, but it'll work. So, so those can be set up as you go.
But the standard bandwidth for a telephone call is 64K, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the bandwidth you need for on the phone network. 64K is what they use. It's 56 plus 8. 8 is used for administrative stuff. Yeah. So I'll show you. I've got a piece of hardware here. I'll show you how this works and what you can do with it. The third scenario is one step more. So you not only have plain old telephone service, so you have a couple of phone lines. You can also sign up for these voice over IP lines from different providers. Like there are a bunch of companies which will allow your Asterisk server to talk to their server, and then they carry your call on a phone line. So they'll have presence in different parts of the world. And so they'll say, okay, well, you can sign up with us, and we've got a point of presence in the UK, we've got a point of presence in the US, in France, and when you use us, we'll route the call to the UK, and then from there it goes on a phone line, and you have to pay some kind of fee to carry that phone call. So you can have those listed in your outgoing and incoming lines as well. You can do rollover, which is, depending on which line is busy, you'll pick the next one. And you can do also things like, when somebody calls tech support, let's say I say 5 of you are in tech support, so you're part of a group. And so when the call comes in, it's going to look for the first person who's not busy, and that's where the call goes. And if you reject it, it will go to the next person. So you can set those things up as well. There are some cases where this has actually worked better than the proprietary hardware that people use for PBXs. If you do a search, you'll find there are some very good cases like British Telecom and so on. Yes?
Have you any experience with the AIX protocol and trunking with the IDs?
No. I haven't done anything with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
AIX. Asterisk interchange.
It's IA.
Yes, IAX. I've got something set up here for IAX, but I haven't really done much trunking with it. I can show you how it works. I actually have one fixed up here with IAX. So usually you find systems using SIP, Session Initiation Protocol, but there are cases where the inter-asterisk exchange, EAX as they call it, is preferred in certain settings. Yeah.
Going back to your example where you talked about the phone being in Singapore and being connected to an Asterisk server in the US, do you run into problems with behind the firewall issues and matting and so forth?
Yeah, so for SIP you will run into a lot of matting issues and firewall issues because SIP is not very robust when it comes to traveling NATs. So in those cases, EAX actually works better. EAX was designed to do certain things in the same session, in the same band as the initial connection. SIP does the initial connection and hands it off to some other process. So SIP calls, typically what happens if you have NAT problems on a SIP network, you call, the phone call will go through, and then when they pick up, it's one way. You can hear them, they cannot hear you. So there you have to go and forward ports on your router. Now, of course, if you're at a hotel, right, you have no access to their routers. You can't tell them forward, 50, 60 for me or something like that. So there you have to use something different, and EAX actually works better in those cases. Like here, I don't even know what the topology is. But I plug this thing in, and Bill was seeing it took like 5 seconds and it works. Yeah.
I've heard the term before, NAT friendly, when talking about VoIP. What exactly is that referring to?
Say that again?
NAT friendly?
So if your networks are all on a public IP network, then it's very easy to find the source and destination. But when you run private IP networks, you typically have a router that's doing a translation from public to private. And so you have multiple private IPs that all get routed through one public IP. So one way is easy to find where the traffic is coming from, but when you go back, when you're coming back into the router, they're like, oh, 50 machines, where did this come from? And if you don't forward the ports, it can't find where this came from. So that's why the call doesn't go through.
I've heard there's a stun server,
Yeah.
but I don't know how it works. Do you have any?
I think the client that comes with GNOME, Akiga, which used to be called GNOME Meeting, they have a stun server. It's basically a tunnel that is set up for SIP services. So if you are behind a firewall and you are on a private IP and the other end is also on a private IP, they have a service that will then set up a tunnel from here to there, and then through that tunnel, you're able to essentially bypass the problems of
So you have to run it at both ends?
Yeah, so you have to have, well, I don't know if it has to be at both ends. Well, if both ends are behind a NAT firewall, yes. But if say one end is public, the other is natted, the natted end will have to run the rest. I haven't gotten into the specifics of how that actually works in terms of hops and so on. All right, so we looked at scenarios. How do you set these up? The next step is you've got to have a dial plan. This is where I've seen a lot of people have questions on these forums, right? Well, it turns out to be that in the excitement of getting hold of a free CD of Asterisk or something, we go, okay, I threw it on the machine, now what? Well, you got to have a plan. So that's where you have to go to a dial plan. So you have a bunch of people, and you have to figure out how you can logically design the network. How can we assign extensions, maybe groups of extensions, and what kind of protocols should these people use? So for example, if somebody travels a lot and they stay at hotels, their protocol of choice should be something like EEX, because you'll have NAT problems. But if it's a desktop at the office, well, that can easily be SIP. Or if it's a phone like this, well, this is just a regular phone, but if it's a physical phone, a lot of phones support SIP, very few phones support EEX. So you have to figure that out. But a dial plan is very important. Once you get the dial plan, then things start falling in place. So for example, here's the dial plan. I want to do this at home, so I'll say, okay, I have a server here. I'm going to be extension 101. My wife is 201. My daughter is 301. My daughter is 20 months old. She doesn't know how to do these things, but let's say she's 301, right? So my extension will be a soft phone on Ubuntu, typically on this laptop. And so that uses SIP. My wife's extension, let's say, will be on a Windows XP machine using Xlite, which is a SIP client, a free SIP client, and let's say that'll be 201. We actually don't have any Windows machines at home. I'm just lying about this. We have only Ubuntu machines at home. And then, for my daughter, because she can't use a computer, I'm going to fix it up so that it's actually a real phone. And that will be 301. And I'll say, okay, well, we'll use EEX for that. This will be a simple diagram. This will give you an idea of, okay, how do I set up my extensions in the config files when I actually do the installation. Here's another one. This is presence-based. This is just for me. So I have 3 extensions for me. One is on my laptop, one is on the desktop at the office, desktop at home. I'll use SIP for these because these are not moving, EEX for this because this moves, and these will be 3 extensions for myself. Me, myself, and I. Now when you call, if I set up the server right, then depending on where I'm available, that phone will ring. In fact, if I'm logged in on all these machines, all the phones will ring. And then I have to pick up one of these. If I don't, it goes to voicemail. Right? So this would be an example of another dial plan. Here's a family dial plan, so a little more. I come up with extensions, the members, what kind of protocol, and then where they live. So I have an idea. So it's not that hard to actually come up with a dial plan. It's simply a list of items so that you can keep track of things. It helps a lot though. Now I came up with this one for a small business. So we have extensions, 1, 2, and 3 for customer support, sales, technical support, and then we've got all these other people. And in this example, I said, okay, my dev team is in Bangalore, and I don't know what their setup will be, so we'll put them through EEX. We have QA team in Bangladesh, we'll put them on EEX. Same thing for London and Singapore. So they're in other places where I don't have access to that network, we'll use EEX. The rest of it will use SIP. So you can come up with one of these.
It has nothing to do with politics at this point.
Quality is, yeah, So the selection of SIP or EEX will determine how the handshake happens and how the call then gets routed. The quality of the call is dependent on the codec that is being used, and then therefore the bandwidth and the latency. So this will not have an impact on those. Yes?
Is there more latency with IAX because the server is always involved in the phone call? Or is that true? Because, I mean, in SIP, after you make the connection, it's handed off to RTP. But in IAX, isn't the server?
Yeah, so server is involved because the call is actually done in band and not out of band. So what I've noticed is with EEX, typically the codecs that are used are a little on the lower side in the sense better with latency. But I haven't actually measured this, but I have read about this where they say EEX actually results in slightly higher latency because it actually has to go in band as opposed to SIP.
So if you had two people in Singapore with phones that were calling into that were dialed, registered to an Asterisk server in the U.S., they would have to make a big round trip just to talk. Whereas if they were
but with SIP, if they're both behind firewalls, they can't even start the call. So, I mean, maybe it's not going to be that clear, but it'll work. So, but yeah, I haven't actually done any measurements to see if the latency is higher. Okay. So now coming to the distribution itself, Asterisk Linux is designed to be small. It is based on 2.6 kernel. I think it's 2.6.12 right now is what they use. It's largely designed for these embedded platforms, Socris and the RAP engine. I have a board here, which is the Socris board. You may have seen this before. It's made by a company here in Santa Cruz. Owned by a guy by the name Soren Christensen, hence the name Socris. These got popular a few years ago when the Wi-Fi revolution was starting. Everybody wanted to set up a Wi-Fi unit. So this one is, it's an x86 processor. So it's x86 compatible, it's a geode processor. And I think it runs at 266 megahertz. It has 128 megs of RAM. And it uses a compact flash form for a hard drive, so no moving parts. It doesn't have any fan or cooling fins or any of those things, so there really are no moving parts in this. And from what I've seen on different forums, this machine with Asterisk Linux can handle about 8 phone calls simultaneously on the network. So if you have requirements past 8, then you have to look at a platform better than this. But it can handle up to 8 calls at the same time. I'll plug this in, then I'll pass it around. You guys can take a look. The version of Asterisk is 1.2. It uses a small web server with PHP in CGI mode, so you can actually do a lot of things through the browser. It's got OpenSSH, SSL. It does something called key disk support, which is very impressive. I'll show you how that works in a minute. It also comes with its own traffic shaping modules. They call it Ask Shaper. And the idea is that when you have multiple phone calls, you want to make sure that there are no bottlenecks. So there's some IP level traffic shaping with IP tables and the traffic control module. It has a TFTP server, so a lot of the soft phones require, when you plug it into the network, they require that they get an IP address and then they get a firmware from the server, and then they boot up. So to send that firmware, this thing has a TFTP server. It also has a regular FTP server, support for some hardware, and then it also has support for the Roaring Penguin PPP over Ethernet protocol. So if you have a DSL provider that uses PPPoE, then you can still go within the distribution.
That's European, right?
PPPoE? No.
Okay.
Yeah. Bell South, which is not part of the new AT&T, is notorious for using PPPoE.
If you've got PPPoE and someone's trying to call you and your link has gone down, how are you going to get the link up?
I believe the PPPoE software, the server that they have in here, has a thing where it detects it's down, it'll try to bring it back up. But of course, if there's a problem on the other end, then you can't.
Yeah, because that's what I thought was the big gripe about PPPoE is that you couldn't really run the server very well.
Well, you can, but it's just that because the PPPoE connection is point-to-point protocol, they can do a lot of throttling on their end and make sure that you don't run all kinds of things on your end. But you can actually run a server. I've run many services on PPPoE.
I thought PPPoE was designed that it only left the connection up for as long as you were trying to use it or something, and they would time out and then take the connection.
Yeah, but there are ways to actually keep it alive, so it stays on. And this has actually been around for a while. The Roaring Penguin client, it works really well. I think the only time I used it was when I had a Pack Bell connection back in 2001, I think. And Red Hat 6 had Roaring Penguin, and that's what I used at that point to keep my servers running and so on. All right, so that's Ask Linux. The forms it comes in. So you can go to their site and get a live CD ISO. The live CD is about 70 megs. It's bootable. You can get the CF card image, which is actually exactly 64 megs. So you grab the image, and then you can use like DD in Linux to write the image over to the CF card. Or you can use, they also provide you with these Windows applications, which will allow you to write the image using Windows onto the compact flash card. So you need a 64 meg card or larger. Doesn't matter if it's larger, but not smaller. And largely, it's designed for these boards, the Socus board and the RAP board. But that's kind of the requirement. 266 megahertz Pentium class or better. I'm sure we can find better if you're just using a plain PC. Most of the GUI, in fact, pretty much all the GUI is through a browser. So once you get it running, you use another machine, get into the GUI, and then work with it. And then all the scripts are editable using text area boxes, and then you get a bunch of other things with Ask Linux. That's the Socrates board that I'm using here. That's from their website. So basically, the CF card plugs in here. If you have a wireless card, like a mini PCI, that can plug in here. You get 3 Ethernets. That's the Geo processor. And of course, you get blinking lights.
No, it doesn't put out a dial tone or ring a telephone.
No.
Okay.
So this thing has a PCI connector, and you can buy a PCI form factor board that will then give you an interface to a phone line, and you can get dial tone and those things. This board, actually, so the board is generic. You can put any distribution on it. But if you want to interface with a phone line, you'll have to get the PCI card for that. This is the RAP board, but AMD doesn't make this processor anymore, so I don't know how long they'll actually manufacture these. But they have other boards on their website. This is similar. It has a CF card. It's got 2 mini PCIs. There's the processor. It's got 2 Ethernet serial. So both platforms are quite similar. They're embedded and no moving parts. All right, so I have a table. This is something that was done by one of the groups in my class. I teach a course on managing open source at SF State. So we go through business models, licensing, and all that. One of the things we do is look at the open source maturity model, which talks about how mature the project is in terms of its use. And OSMM is from Navica, Bernard's company. So you want to know more about OSMM, Bernard's the man. He can tell you all about it and then some. So in terms of the score here, these are different areas that we looked at. Software, technical support, documentation, and so on. And then these get scored. And then based on the scores, we come up with a final score. So a score of 52, then you look at this table. So it falls, if you are an early adopter, it falls somewhere here. So it's good for pilot departmental use, but not for production. If you are a pragmatist, it falls in the experimentation category, but not quite pilotist yet. Now this was done about 7-8 months ago, so I suspect the score has gone up. One word of caution when you start looking for things on Ask Linux, the software works, the distribution works really well. It's impressive what they've crammed into 64 megs. But the documentation sucks. The documentation is horrible. It's missing It's outdated, incomplete, missing links. You go to the website of the guy who wrote it, half the things are missing. It's very hard even on the forums to actually pull anything out of their knowledge base, the so-called knowledge base. Yes?
So this score is actually for AST Linux, not
Yes.
for Asterisk.
No, this is for Ask Linux that we assessed as a distribution. All right, so moving on. This is how Ask Linux works. You can start off with a CD ISO image, compact flash image. You can also install it to a hard drive. So you can always get a PC and then just install it. You get the option at boot to install it to the drive. And so it runs as a regular distribution there. Or you can even grab a VMware image and run it as a VMware virtual machine and then work from there. The way this differs from most other distributions, there's a feature called USB key disk. USB key disk is, so you take any USB key, I have a very small one here, 32 megs, it's kind of hard to find these. So take any USB key and plug it into the Ask Linux system, be it a desktop-based thing or the Socrates board, and you set it up, and then what it does is all the configuration for your server and the logs and voicemail gets stored on this. So if you wanted to try out many different configurations, you want to test, do testing, figure out if you want to do production and so on, get 4 of these. And every key is going to have a different setup. Depending on which key you plug in, it takes on that form. So you can try a lot of things with the same installation. Same thing with the live CD. Live CD is already burned, and so that doesn't change. But anything that you do with will run here. Now, the only thing that takes up a lot of space is voicemail. So I start with 32 megs, but yeah, get a gig or something so that you have plenty of space to store your voicemail and all that. But yeah, that's the beauty of this distribution is as many keys as you want, and that many scenarios, that many things to test and play with. And if something breaks, take out the put the old one back, it'll be back to work. And nothing else gets touched. So nothing else changes there.
So your dial plan would be would go onto the key disk?
Yep. Dial plan will be here, your passwords will be here, your voicemail, logs, config files, all of that is here. So without the key disk, this is just a bland image of the distro. All the settings are here. And that makes for a very easy platform to test with.
Voicemails are MP?
You can assign it as WAV or MP3 or whatever format you'd like to store it in. These are some screenshots. I'll put it up and actually show you a live one, but this is what it looks like in a browser. Once it's running, you get to a browser, this is what it looks like. It's all, config is all browser-based. It tells you how long it's been running, how many processors are running. And in this particular example, if you look at the last line, it says dev SDA1, that's the key disk. And USB mounts as a SCSI device, so that's dev SDA1, and it's well, they say 32 megs, it's really 30.8, and used is only 324K. So I got 28.9 megs free on this one at this point. And it mounts as a MNT/KD, KD is for key disk, and it gives you, the stats whether it's getting full or not. This is the log, so these logs will also live on this thing, and you get logs like this. What was the call, starting time, ending time, did it go through or not, it failed, what extension, what destination, and so it will keep a log entry, and you can say, show me 20, show me 40, show me the entire set of logs, and that also gets stored on the key disk. Now this is the part that is difficult to work with because Ask Linux requires you to do all the editing of the config file by hand. So there's no GUI as yet where you can check boxes and it generates the config for you. So you need to know what you're doing here when you start editing the config file. But as opposed to most other distributions where you SSH into the box and hand edit it using VI or something, which you can, here what you do is you just click on the file in the web browser, and it opens up in a text area, and then you just edit it there and save it, and the changes get accepted. For AS Linux, if you're going to start with this, these are the only 3 files you need to mess with. In fact, if you're not going to use eeks, then you need to mess with only 2 files to kind of get it up and running. Once you see how it works, you can mess with some of the other ones. These are screenshots of those 3 files. So I just put this in here as an example if you need a reference. So for example, here what's happening is I set up extensions, and I'm saying extension 101, comma 1, this is for the priority of this extension. Dial a SIP call going out to this identity. 102, 103, 104, 105. So 101, 2, 3, and 5 are SIP, and 104 is EEX, and it's EEX version 2, so we say EEX 2. And the EEX setting is in a different file. And that gets set up here. The extension is secret, which is the password, and so on. And the settings for SIP, which are 101, 2, 3, and 5, are a different file called sip.conf, and they are set up like this. There will be 3 other sections for each extension. So these you got to do by hand. Yeah.
What makes using AS Linux worthwhile compared to just using the regular Asterisk distribution on a generic Linux file?
So if you use some of the other distributions, you have to have a dedicated machine, and it usually wipes everything out. Here you can start off with a bootable.
It wipes everything out.
Well, like Trixbox, for example, when you install it, if you have something else running on that box, it's going to wipe the drive.
Why not just use the Asterisk distribution itself? That's what I don't understand.
Asterisk distribution.
The one from Digi.
Wait, but you still need a dedicated machine.
Sure,
right?
You need a dedicated machine.
Here, I can use my laptop to boot off the CD with a key disk, and play with it, figure out how it works, and then when I'm done, I can go back to it.
I mean, Ron's right. Actually, you don't even need a dedicated machine if it's not that big user.
Exactly. So in terms of starting as a first step, this makes a makes for a good option where you don't need to have a dedicated machine to set up a PBX. You can use any computer you have at home to play with a key disk and a bootable CD. And once you figure out how it works, then you can decide whether you want a dedicated distribution or not.
I mean, because we've got Asterisk running on just some of our desktops just to play with it, and that seems to be fine. I didn't have to buy any special hardware or learn another distribution.
Well, you have to learn one. So.
But isn't this derived from the original Asterisk?
So Asterisk is not the distro itself. It's just the software, and the code that's written to run the PBX. But that PBX code has to run on some distro. So you could throw Asterisk on Ubuntu, on Red Hat, or one of those things. But this is a complete distro. So this is Asterisk plus all the other things, the kernel, the traffic shaper, all the other things that you need to.
It just seems like for most of us that are familiar with some Linux distribution already, it's simpler just to put the software on.
You could, and I'll show you how Trixbox works. That's more of a traditional setup there. But I see pros and cons on both sides. Even if you're not using hardware like Socrates, you can still use a regular x86 machine and set this up.
I think it's more of an appliance, like
the approach here is of an appliance as opposed to a server.
I don't like appliances.
Yes,
Well, that's the advantage, is that if you start with AST Linux, you can put it on a Socrates disk and put your power consumption back into flashlight battery levels.
12 well, the other thing is, so let's say I'm running my setup on this with a key disk, and at some point I realize that my requirements have outgrown this box. I need a better box. Well, I can switch over to a different box, like a faster x86 machine, but I still have all the config right here. All I got to do is unplug this, plug it into the other machine, boot up, and it to work.
Well, so what's your comment on the Ubuntu distribution has a bunch of packages called Asterisk, like Asterisk Common and all that stuff. Is that kind of maybe not such a good idea to?
My experience with using Asterisk on Ubuntu has not been good, but I haven't used it on 7.04 as yet.
Well,
So-
I'm still running 6.10.
Yeah, so 6.10, I have not had, up to 6.10, I have not had a good experience with Asterisk and Ubuntu, because in many cases you have to go and actually recompile things.
Because I mean, they really messed up Ruby, so.
Right. So Ubuntu would not be my platform of choice. Trixbox is actually based on CentOS 4, which is based on Red Hat 4, Red Hat Enterprise Linux 4. So they claim that we have this, the stability of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, or CentOS, and then we have all the other stuff integrated in it. So that's their approach. But you can actually run it on Debian or OpenSUSE or any of those.
So, got a comment. My exchange student was running Skype.
Hmm?
Now that's basically just a PC voice over IP front end. They're actually running, Skype is actually running a server somewhere that does all the work of a PBX.
True, but Skype uses their own proprietary protocol and not SIP or EAPS or any of those things. So there are ways to actually, with some pain, to get Skype users to then connect to an Asterisk system and then patch through. But the protocol that Skype uses is not SIP. So you can't really, readily talk to them.
Okay.
One nice thing about running a standard distribution like, say, Ubuntu or Debian or something like that, or even Red Hat, is that you've got the updates. So like if we say there's a security bug in the kernel, as long as you're running your apt-get upgrade or the Red Hat equivalent, you'll have an up-to-date kernel or to have that security patch. Whereas if you're taking one of these, like Asterisk Linux, what sort of mechanism, if it's just a fork of Debian or a fork of Red Hat, then that's probably fine, because it'll pull in those updates. But that's always an important consideration when you're considering one of these specialized protocols. And like with MythTV, the same kind of things happen with, say, a MythTV distribution. You've got to make sure that you can apply those security updates when they're released. How does it work with Asterisk Linux?
So there are a couple of things here. One is Asterisk Linux is derived from multiple projects. So a lot of the web interface stuff that they have, they get it from an embedded firewall platform called MonoWall, which actually runs off of BSD and not Linux. So they take MonoWall, and I believe, well, if you do a search for MonoWall, you'll find it on Google, but the way they spell MonoWall is the O's in mono are actually zeros, M0, N0, wall. But MonoWall is a very, very widely used BSD-based firewall platform. So what they do is they take a lot of the stuff above the kernel level and use it here. And then they borrow a bunch of things from other platforms. So the way Asterisk Linux will update is that when a new version comes out, you'll get this. You have to get a new image here or here. But your settings are already here, so you would have to get a new CF card, burn it, turn off the machine, pull the old one out, put the new one in, and you get a new distro. The other point, which is running with standard distributions. So again, there are two sides to that story. I agree that you get a lot of patches and all those things on time, and you can apply those. So for example, with Trixbox, which actually used to be called Asterisk at Home previously, and then they changed the name to Trixbox. It's based on CentOS. There, what happened was one of the versions of Trixbox, I think was 1.2 or so, updates of CentOS. So when you did yum update, actually broke everything because they did not manage to fix the dependencies. So CentOS released the updates, but the project did not. So if you ran the update, it updated the distro and then broke everything else. So then they had to actually go back and put in the update script to avoid all the updates from CentOS so that the distro would actually stay together. So I guess you have both sides of that story. And again, it really depends on who's putting this thing up, who actually produces the distro and puts it out, because quality control will come from there. And then how many people you have in that community, how active are the forums. So these guys have moved all their forums to SourceForge. So you can go there and search, but I'm not impressed with their collection of documentation, absolutely. Yeah.
That is, can I interpret what you're just saying, that you are not totally convinced that this is the production stable, system?
I think you can run a small office with it.
Yeah.
And by small office, I mean maybe about half a dozen people in one office and maybe a couple more extensions. But if you're running more, I'm not sure if this will actually. And again, I have no numbers to really back this up, but and it could very well work. But I don't know. I've seen better, I guess, feedback with things like Trixbox. But then again, Trixbox now has a company behind it for Phonality. They bought Trixbox, the copyright to that, and they pump money into it. They have an appliance model. So you go to Trixbox, you can buy an entire appliance, rack mountable, and so on. So, but yeah, I would definitely say this is a good place to start. I don't know if you can actually run a fairly big system with it. Yes?
But if you go past the hobby stage, which this is not derogative meant or anything, but some of us are probably here today because we wonder if we're going to switch from the PBX we had to an open source one. I mean, the only Windows boxer we have left in my company is the one that runs the PBX.
Okay.
And I want to get rid of that one too.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but it's very sensitive because, the PBX we had a card in it that basically ran the whole PC. The PC was almost like just a host for the card, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're thinking about what's going on.
Right.
But we really want to get rid of that box, and that's where we say, well, what's the path through this? Can we really build a production stable environment, dual power supplies, RAID 5, all the stuff that we need to have in order to rely upon our phone gear?
Well, and I don't know about your environment in terms of what your requirements are, but yeah, past the hobby stage, I would say look at Trixbox because it not only has more features, it has more capabilities in terms of integration with other things, which Linux at this point does not. And like somebody just said, this approach is more of the appliance approach as opposed to the other ones where they actually run a full service with CRM integration and all those other things. So yeah, this is good for hobby and playing, small office maybe, but at that point you might want to look at Trixbox. I'll put it up in a minute. Yes.
Well, what on the other side, backing back to the original thing you're saying about these are like networks?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any name server type service so that your open source PBX can have its name linked so that other open source PBXs can look you up and call you?
Yeah, so there are ways to actually get asterisk servers to talk to each other. Provided you allow the other party to talk to you and search your directories and go across. So it is possible to get server-to-server connection, and those PBXs then can talk to each other and discover other services. So like, I believe Linux has what's the name of the Apple service that discovers? Rendezvous, yeah. So it's got Rendezvous stuff built in. So supposedly if you plug it into your network, it can then discover all the other services on there and then announce itself. So yeah, it is possible to get asterisk servers to talk to each other.
I think an interesting thing would be a kind of a Google-like search and a directory service layer out there so that, because
there are services out there where you
the
can register
phone directory type.
Asterisk, and we will participate in the worldwide Asterisk network.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that's pretty simple to set up.
Yeah, so you can get them to talk to each other, and then there is essentially a discovery mechanism running amongst that group, where you can then discover whatever the other, obviously the other party has to allow discovery, otherwise you can't actually go
and then make phone calls by clicking on a web page.
That's exactly, the whole idea is you click on a number on a web page or identity, and then the voice over IP client should be able to pick that up and then, place the call for you.
The only downfall with some of those services is that you have to agree to letting people dial through your POTS line. And therefore, so for instance, if someone sits in Netherlands and they want to make a phone call to Palo Alto where we are, they are then entitled to use our outgoing POTS line to place a call in Palo Alto.
And you can configure that to say that, you know, if the call is actually coming from another Asterisk server, then only certain rules will apply to them, so they can make 650 calls or 415, but they can't make anything else, or you can always have rules for those. Yeah, once you start configuring this, of course, you know, there's no end to it. We're at 8:15, so let me run through this. I've got some screenshots of different soft phones, so that's the Kiga on Ubuntu, but so that's basically what comes with GNOME. That's OpenWango, runs on Windows and Linux. That's a screenshot from Windows. Looks kind of fancy. This is a Lin phone, very basic SIP phone. Not too many fancy features. There's X-Lite for Windows. This is a free version of something else that they sell. This is EEXCOM, which actually uses EEX as opposed to SIP. And as you can see, the interface is pretty basic. And I haven't had a whole lot of joy using this, but it kind of works. The good thing is that EEXCOM actually, so you have the libraries available in Linux, and then you can build your own GUI to make it work. And then this is KIAX coming from the KDE side, which looks a lot better. This is for EEX again. So 8:15. Let's see. Well, maybe I can pull up really quickly what's on this machine to show you, and then I'll show you the second one.
So how long did it take you to actually get this up and running? Because you made it sound kind of, you know, like you got to be really roll up your sleeves and really.
Well, I mean, you know, I can tell you I didn't start yesterday, so I've been playing with this for a while. But then, you know, getting familiar with different distributions takes a while.
I just meant Aston.
Huh? As Linux itself,
How long did it take you to kind of get it started?
I spent a lot of time looking for instructions, so that took a lot of time. But now that there are some, you know, I have some bookmarks and I'll post them on PenLUG, you know, for others. But once you know where to find these things, you know, this can easily be done in under a day to just set up the basic stuff.
There is an O'Reilly book. I don't know how up to date it is though.
There's a new version coming out in July.
On Asterisk or Linux?
Asterisk.
Asterisk itself, yeah, that's actually a very good book, the O'Reilly book.
It explains a lot about the
Yeah.
config files.
All right, let's see. Pull the antennas off my access point. Let me quickly change my network here. Okay. So my access point is called Give. I give away my bandwidth freely to everybody in my neighborhood. I was like, what name do I choose? Give sounds good. Okay, so I have 192.168.89.129. The Socrates box is set up to run at 125. So So when you connect to so this is running on the Socrates board, you get a screen with nothing on it. That's because the server actually, or the system requires you to run through HTTPS. The certificate is not installed properly, so it will complain, but you know, you can fix that. So then the session goes through SSL. There's an admin and password login, and this is the interface you get. Tells you how long it's been running and all those things. I don't have a key disk installed, so it doesn't show the key disk over there. But if you go to the config, for example, you see all the files here, and if you wanted to edit one of these, click on it, it shows up in a box, edit whatever you have to. When you're done, hit submit, and that will take the changes.
Does it validate stuff, or
Huh?
when you submit, does it validate? And
No, that's why you have to be careful. If there's a typo or you miss something, you're on your own. That's where the key disk actually comes in handy if you have like a couple of these things. So if you have a working system, you make an image of this thing onto another disk and then mess with that. If that breaks, you can go back to this, but it does not validate. There is a thing where you can actually run, some basic commands via the browser. No such command.
Maybe you have to put this.
Is there a
in front of
specific-
it.
Huh?
Maybe you have to put this in front of it. It's not in your path.
That's true, maybe so. Let's just do your name. Oh, I think it's because the key disk is not plugged in. There's a TFTP server that you can configure for SIP phones. That's the status page. That's the network page. Oh, there's the shell. I think this is the one. So there you go. So you can type.
If it's TFTP, is there anything remotely resembling security about that? I don't remember TFTP as being outstandingly secure.
Well, TFTP is usually used just for PXE booting other devices and then sending the firmware. So in most cases, when you're running a SIP phone, you've got a firmware image, you want to send it to the phone. So you set it up here, and when somebody plugs the phone on the network, the TFTP server then will send out the firmware to that phone, and then that phone starts working.
So the phone doesn't have flash that you could just leave the firmware?
Well, in terms of the settings and things like that, in some cases you actually have to use a TFTP server. And I haven't done much with SIP phones, but some of them require you to have a TFTP server on the network.
Say, have you actually, is that a SIP phone over there?
No, this is a regular phone. I'll show that in a minute how that works. So that's basically what we have in Asterisk Linux, and then every time you make changes, you have to go to this page and reload the Asterisk services so that the server reloads with the new settings. You can back up your key disk images by clicking on there. I'm going to do that. And it's got PHP info for the PHP stuff that runs on that thing. So a lot of this is coming from MonoWall that already has this interface folded in, so they took it from there.
So if they've got PHP running, they could actually do a configuration menu with a kind of a BNF syntax for the configuration, so that you could kind of have a language where it would validate.
Yeah, you could.
Do a compile, so maintain your files with the syntax checked.
You possibly could, and I haven't looked at what else to do with the PHP part other than just running the interface with editing the files and then saving them and so on. Let me quickly switch over to, okay, so Trixbox would be the next step. If you are going to use Trixbox, it used to be called Asterisk at home. It is CentOS based. The caution is that it will wipe out your entire drive, so don't do this on your desktop at home that you want to play with or so on. Get a dedicated machine, and when you install this, it'll warn you that it's going to wipe everything out. Yes?
I was going to say, if you don't read it very carefully, it does do that. I made that mistake.
Yes.
Is there any possibility of running under a virtual machine?
I haven't tried, but I suppose you could.
I tried it once.
Yeah.
And
So
the virtual machine is not fast enough to actually run the codecs that we're going to use. So this, I mean, you can get it running and you can play around with the config files, but then you can't really make phone calls.
So this is a way, if you have a junker.
Yeah, if you have an old machine lying around, you can put a drive in there, install it, and see how Trixbox works. Trixbox also has a web-based interface. So that's the note of caution there, that it will wipe out things. Now, Trixbox installation, the way it starts is it'll boot up from the CD. It's a typical Red Hat installation, and it goes through a cycle of 3 reboots to actually do the final installation. So first is just a basic install. then it reboots and grabs a bunch of other files, and then reboots again and configs, and finally it'll install all the drivers needed for the hardware you have on your machine. So it goes through, I think, 3 reboots. Okay, so here's something I have just for this. I made this up. So I have an outline: 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, and 111. So 101 is on my laptop. 102 is using a client called Gizmo on this Nokia 770, which is a SIP client.
Is that the same as the Gizmo project?
Yeah, it is a Gizmo project, but runs on the Nokia 770.
So that's a SIP client.
So they have the Gizmo network, which works with there, and then they have a secondary login for Asterisk. So there's a feature where you say, also connect to my Asterisk server, and so then you can route your calls through either their network or your network. In fact, what I can do is, let me see if I can show you this interface here. What's the name of the network here? Anybody know?
Harvest. There was a Linksys and my connection too.
Which one allows you to go out of Linksys?
I think Westport, there's a key on it though. There's a WEP on it.
I'll see if Linksys lets us get out.
Yeah, that's my favorite ISP, Linksys.
Linksys, yeah. They're all over the place, aren't they?
Yeah, they have access points everywhere. Westport is the one that's provided by the building, and there's a web key on it, but it's a fairly easy one. I don't remember offhand though. Last month there was a slip of paper on that table.
I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0.
You know, it's a hex.
Yeah, hex.
Hex. 1, 2, 3, 4.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0.
0. Let's see. Okay. Oh, password. Well, that's my password.
They're setting a new password.
Yeah, I haven't actually set up. This is a clean install a couple days ago, so. Okay, looks like I am connected. And I'm able to get out. All right. So, fire up my soft phone and see if it works. In the meantime,
Something like, oh, good. But it sounds like,
okay, yeah. So this is Trixbox. This is the interface. This is running in my office. Again, web-based, and it starts off in user mode, and you can switch to admin mode. And in Trixbox, you have an interface for making all kinds of changes. So there's something called free PBX, and this is where all the setup is. So for example, under extensions, I've got my extension set up 101, 102, 103, and so on. So here, as opposed to actually editing config files, you would just click on, or say add extension, fill out the form, and it stores the config for you, right? So there are other features here, outbound routes, inbound routes, trunks, which are the phone lines, ring groups, so you can put people into a group and the call goes off to a group, music on hold, recordings, and so on.
So Trixbox has basically forms, a front end of forms
Yeah.
for the configuration files.
So, as opposed to Ask Linux where you have to do things by hand, here everything is form-based. And so you do have things like if you leave something out, it'll come back and say, oh, wait a minute, you gotta fill this out.
But free PBX is separate from
Right, so
from
FreePBX
Trixbox.
is a separate project, but Trixbox actually provides it within its,
It integrates it.
yeah, it's basically an aggregation of different projects put together, right? FreePBX has a flash-based panel, an operator panel, which shows you the extensions you have, your trunks, outbound lines, and you have what's called a parking lot where you can put a call on hold and transfer to another extension. So on the left side, the items that you see there are the phones that are now available. So 101 is this guy. 111 is in my office. It's a regular desk phone. And 104 is this phone here, which uses EECS. So for this, what I have to do is, the white cable is coming from the phone, plain old phone system. The yellow cable is Ethernet. That's actually going out to Bill's laptop and is hopping over, what do you call it? Internet connection sharing in Windows so that it can get onto the Wi-Fi network, right? So I don't even know how many NACs we're going through. And this is just power. And the blue line is, light is a good thing. It means when I plug this thing in, it found the mothership, right? So if I pull this out,
What's the name of that device?
this is called the IAXY, I-A-X-Y, and Digium sells this. I bought it as part of a dev kit. So when I plug this in, we'll wait for the blue light.
It's an ATN.
Yeah, but for EECS, not SIP. So now everybody pray.
It's got a little flash and
There we go.
it's got a little flash memory. It's doing an IP lookup.
Yeah.
It's
So,
pinging the IP number and
well, it gets an IP address from Bill's laptop, which then NATs over to the Wi-Fi network here, which I don't know if is NATed or not.
okay, and
But basically what happens is, I've had to provision the IAXY with the server address of that machine and the account and password for 104. So you have to do that once.
and it has hardware conversion so that it rings this phone or recognizes the dial tones on
Right, so,
the
so
telephone.
this thing has dial tone, right, which is generated by the ATA. Yeah,
But your server is in your office, is on a public IP address, right?
yes, in San Francisco.
How much is that thing?
I think that was like 75 or 80 bucks. There was one price for the dev kit. You get this and you get the PCI card that goes in the server, hook up to the phone line. I forget how much that was. It was
Oh,
part
that
of
sounds like a deal.
Yeah.
The Slashdot was talking about buying a DT104 card for $230.
Well, you can shop around. Digium is the one that makes this dev kit, but I've heard that you can get other brands that are cheaper. There's a brand like Rhino, I guess.
We've got lots of brands.
Yeah, and they're cheaper than this, but I got this a couple of years ago. So at this point, these are connected. Let me see if I can get my Nokia connected. And you said it was Westport? Let's see if I can. Bear with me here.
It's called Asterisk. It's another. Well, you can buy brand series and stuff. You can get $40 in the biggest.
I know.
Using the.
So I'm going to try to use this Nokia device to get online.
There's a playing card, is 800, and basic for plug-in modules, so that's fully equipped card, it's almost like $3,000.
For-
24 lines.
For a T1.
No, that's just for the subscriber lines. And then in addition to that, we need to have a state, we're gonna do T1, which I've failed. I'm trying to find someone who can provide me, exchange or whatever, much speedier Ethernet line. Because the T1 line now is, from the super truck or whatever, that costs us something like $820 a month.
We could buy it for $425.
I know.
All right, so now you can actually see my Nokia 770 through BNC. So that's Gizmo. So this is running on the Nokia device right here. And let me clear this up a little, so I'll leave it there. So this is Gizmo, I'm connected. If I flip over to the flash panel on Trixbox, it shows that the Gizmo Nokia 770 is online, right? So if I want to call from the Gizmo, so let me call from here, and I'll call the Sony phone over there, which is 104. Let me switch it so you guys can see it. Okay, so I'm calling 104, and then Gizmo is going to tell me which network do you want to use. I'll use my secondary network. Hello? 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 Can you hear me now?
What's the time delay?
Well, you try. Just the mic's over here.
1. That's pretty fast. Yeah.
Better than satellite. So at this point,
Better than cell phone.
hello? Yeah.
Okay.
So at this point, the call is going from Gizmo, which is SIP, from here to San Francisco, and in my office, the Trixbox server then switches it over to EEX, and then sends it back to 104 over there. So I can be anywhere, and that phone can be plugged in anywhere. And
So
it works.
this Gizmo phone is just a SIP phone, right?
It's just a SIP phone.
Do you have any resource usage for the server itself with this connection going? So is there any web-based CPU usage and memory usage or anything?
I find it very amusing to consider that you've got a PA system now.
Nice. I hide these things in people's houses, and you know, you can just take over the lights, speak into the phone whenever you want. So there, those are the specs, but I don't know if the call is actually taken up. I'm sure there must be a way to actually look up how much the call is taken up.
But when you hang up, it'll go down.
Okay, so then this call,
Just to refresh this page.
so I hang up. Now, can somebody call my office number? It's 415. Anybody have a phone? Your number might show up here, so
415?
338 7016. Any one person. 415-338-7016. So then this guy should receive the call and then forward to all my identities online at this point. All right, so the call's coming in. Do you get anything? It's ringing. Okay, so I get my call here on my laptop, and I can reject it. Now it rings on the.
It rang on voicemail.
Wait, 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 wait.
Voicemail.
Okay, all right. Can you call again? I'll disconnect 101. So then let's see where the call goes. Well, the flash panel has a bit of a lag, so it takes a few seconds for this thing to go away. Okay, so now it's ringing. Let's see where it goes. So it's coming here now, which is the next available extension. It says incoming call. Hello?
Again, voicemail.
You went to voicemail?
Yeah.
I guess I picked up something late. So then it goes and finds whichever extension is then available. If I hang this one up,
That's busy.
yeah.
Well, it probably didn't go off.
Yeah, Gizmo's not shutting down cleanly. Okay, that's the end of Gizmo. If I want to call from here, outgoing, so I dial 9, which is for the line outside. Dialing my cell phone number. So the ICSI shows that it's trying to dial out. I think this line hasn't hung up, so that's why it's not able to go out. I have only one line in the office.
Can you go forth the call from this screen?
I believe you can. Yeah, Flash has got its own challenges in Linux, so I don't know, sometimes it doesn't work. Okay, what else can we do?
We'll click on the extension one, see if that is any more cooperative.
See, I hung up Gizmo, but it still shows as this thing is on.
And
Now it's gone. This thing is still on.
How long have you had this G-Box running?
Oh, I just set it up to play with it just a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. So I'm not running anything production to actually support any of those things.
So this is, so probably what happens is the cell carrier is staying connected to your interface card. The interface card doesn't yet know it has to do the hang up.
Yeah, the interface card has to hang up, and I'm not sure why it's not hanging up.
it's even still showing your Nokia is connected even though it's grayed the box out.
Yeah.
The busy detection is always a challenge with the voice over IP going out with the trunk lines. There are different signals that the cards have to detect at different call frequencies, and sometimes it's difficult to get right. I've seen this before. Sometimes people set up timeouts so that if one side is on, the other one is off. The call just gets dropped automatically.
I guess I could go into.
It's still busy, so I've got to call your number, it's still busy.
Well, I could reboot, but yeah, that
Yeah,
comes.
that's.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's the setup. So you can do a lot more things with Trixbox, and I'd still go back to the first point, which is first you have to have a dial plan. If you don't have a dial plan, then half the time you don't even know what you're doing. So, and that was the setup we had here. That's the dev kit I use. So that's the ICSI from Digium. And if you do a search for ICSI S101, you'll find. And this is the PCI card that's in the server. And this is the TDM400P. It basically comes with 4 slots, which correspond to these 4 outlets. And then depending on the daughter board that you plug in, you either get the foreign exchange office or the foreign exchange subscriber capability, incoming and outgoing. So one goes to a phone, one goes to the phone line. So you can buy those depending on what you want to do.
And that's under $100, you said?
Well, the whole kit, well, this was under 100. This was like 75 or 80 or something at that time. I believe it's cheaper now. These I don't remember, but the pricing was for the whole kit.
How do those run? I think we have one in the backup system, and we had 2 cards, and it ran about $1,000.
No, I don't think it's that expensive because
It's pretty expensive. The modules are around $75. This plug-in modules.
the plug-in modules, yeah.
And the card is, I think it's around 100 or so, so get them fully.
Yeah, because the card that I have has got 2 modules, one in and one out.
There was a Slashdot had a discussion of voice over IP telephone, and there's a bunch of people replying with simple ideas. One of their recipes was Trixbox, OpenPBX, Y8, and TDM22B, which is another card like that. And that card was no longer for sale, but its replacement was $220. My mental model is it's the card that gives you dial tone to a conventional phone. It's not the hard. There's 2 things you can do. You can answer a ringing phone. That's one card, like a modem, and then you have to generate the dial tone, which and ringing the phone. That's
This thing's not hanging up.
additional money.
One big advantage of the ZTEL cards from Digium compared to other solutions is if you have multiple extensions on the same card, they can do what they call a native bridge, so you can route fax calls and other things which you cannot usually.
To do my configurations on this.
Yeah, so you can go, I suppose you can buy this box and it comes with, all the GUI and all the configuration stuff that you need, and basically an appliance approach as opposed to a beige box PC and all those things. And then they have pricing for support and so on. But these are not available as yet. They're
There's no estimated street price or
I
retail price?
don't know.
So you think it's probably just cheaper doing what you were showing here?
Well, again, what I'm doing is, like I said, I'm playing with this stuff to see how it works and, be able to demonstrate in my class, give them a better understanding of this. But if you're actually running a real business, just like anything else, you want to run your email on a beige box under the desk or not?
There's one.
Digium is doing the same thing.
Yeah.
They have a thing called Asterisk now, and they're also shipping an appliance similar to this. And also, if you look at Linksys, they're shipping an appliance that's running Asterisk also. For small, like 8 lines. 8 extension. I can't remember, but if you look on the Linksys site, then look at, I don't know what to look at, telephony.
How long did you set up the Trixbox stuff?
How long did it take? The installation takes about half hour, 45 minutes. You have to sit there though because it goes through those reboots. So after the first install, it will spit the disk out and reboot, but then pull the disk back in and then kind of hang. So you have to, sit there and watch it do that thing. But about half hour, 45 minutes, the whole install and stuff is done, ready to go. And then it'll take. So what I did here was, and I'll make this available, I guess, to Bill at some point. Added a bunch of links here, and I found this guide here called Trixbox Without Tears. Very extensive, about 200 pages long, PDF document. Grab it and keep a copy. Every single detail of every screen, what goes in where, what does it mean. So if you follow that, it'll probably take you another hour to do a basic config and set up extensions.
It comes up on Google when you do Trixbox Asterisk.
Yeah.
That's a really
and a bunch of other links.
impressive document.
This is also a very interesting document also for Trixbox, but not as extensive as the last one. So that's all I have, and I rebooted the server just to make sure my phone line doesn't hang. So let me try this one one more time.
Record again, or?
Huh?
Record?
I'm going to call out.
So
Yeah, try it, but I didn't know enough about it.
So caller ID and so forth is supported?
Yeah.
I started over.
So you have to set it up though. So I'm calling my cell phone here.
No, I said
But it hung up, so.
the GUI works, but if you come to a point where you can't figure it out.
Which reference is where? Just
Yes, not exchange.
Is your Chris box answering?
Hello? You can do feedback, right?
Okay.
So this is going from the PBX side, extension 104, dialing out to a line 9. So all the phone calls will originate from my office. So if I was traveling and I wanted to call a bunch of people for work purposes, then I could always dial out from this extension any number in the US, and that would originate at Asterisk.
So that hung up very promptly.
Yeah. And again, you know, the hardware I have in my office is an old machine from the lab that nobody uses anymore, so I wouldn't trust it very much.
Does this GUI do the hardware configs too?
Configuring, oh, you mean like configuring the Zaptel card and all that? They have scripts.
If you're configuring a SIP trunk.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Well,
do
yeah, you can configure the trunks here. Let's see. There. So if we go into FreeBBX setup. So yeah, if you want to do the trunks, it automatically picks up my Zaptel, you know, route. But you could always add a trunk here and pick what kind of trunk you want. SIP trunk, EX or ZAP, enum, and you could essentially configure it right here. But you know, like if you want to do the basic Zaptel config, they have a script called gen Zaptel config or something like that, and there you have to drop to the command line, type that, and then it runs through and detects the hardware, spits out and tells you what's available, and basically make sure it's working.
And this is running on Asterisk 1.2?
Yeah, this is 1.2. I'm not too happy with the number of screens they have for this, but then this is the free stuff, right? So,
You're assuming the paid stuff would be better.
huh?
You're assuming the paid stuff would be better.
Hey, you know,
That's not necessarily the case.
I don't think I'm actually going to see the paid stuff because, well, I teach for a living, so
Just
I can't
ask them to
afford
get
that.
you
So, does it show anywhere the version?
He said it was one.
Oh, there. Where was it? I don't see it. Up top?
Driver information.
Oh, here, 1.2.19.
So we heard from somebody that the latest so-called stable version of Asterisk 1.4 was actually not very stable, and that's why many people are sticking with it.
That's what I've heard as well, that people are dropping back to 1.2 because 1.4 has got some issues. And you know, the other thing that I was pointing out to where there was stability problem with CentOS, or rather compatibility with CentOS and Asterisk at one point, where if you did the updates for CentOS, it broke the Asterisk modules itself. So you would have to go and actually recompile all the modules because it would break up the code. There's some of those ifs are still there. But it looks like 1.2 is what everybody's using. All right. Anything else? It's always fun to listen to the phone ring when it actually works, and I can assure you that it wasn't the first go. So, thank you.